The straw man is a front, a third party who is put up in name only to take part in a transaction. Nominal party to a transaction. One who acts as an agent for another for the purpose of taking title to real property and executing whatever documents and instruments the principal may direct respecting the property. Person who purchases property for another to conceal, identify a real purchaser, or to accomplish some purpose otherwise not allowed. That's from Black's Law Dictionary. When you were born, your parents were deceived into thinking that registering your birth and getting a birth certificate was necessary. When they unwittingly applied for your birth certificate, two things happened. They allowed the state legal interest in their property, including their children. That's you. That's what you did when you had a baby and you got a birth certificate. You also allowed a straw man to be created. For the rest of your life, the straw man would be used against you, but your parents had no way of knowing this. The registering of your birth created a contract, but this contract just happens to be null and void because the contract is not valid without a meeting of the minds. Also, there was no actual application that was filled out. Your parents merely signed as informant on an information sheet. Working off this information sheet, the state registered the birth event, which created a new birth and that of a straw man. A new fictitious entity name which resembles yours, but is written in all capital letters like this. It is Dog Latin, the language of the illiterate, and there are no allowances for it in proper grammatical rules of English. The state holds legal title. Once the state has accomplished this commercial transaction, it issues you a certified copy of the birth certificate and retains the original, thereby holding legal title to the fictitious entity name. Likewise, for your car, the state ultimately is the holder in due course if they possess the manufacturer's statute of origin or certificate of origin for the vehicle, the MSO or the COV. Taken from the land and cast upon the sea. The events that build up to this treachery have a far reach through history. As far back as 1666, with the creation of the Sestake v. Maritime Trust, which was set up in the event that someone was lost at sea. Considered dead 7 years later, the bankrupt estate immediately goes into probate, and trustees are appointed to oversee the bankrupt entity. This is still the way things work today with the registering of your birth certificate, which captures you from the land as a living man or woman and physically and spiritually sets you afloat on the sea of commerce. On your 7th birthday, you could have known about the Sestake V or being considered lost at sea, and that you are in fact quite alive and well, living on the land. But this was a deception, and no 7-year-old is aware of these things, nor are their parents. We propose moving forward on the land and as living flesh and blood men and women with a live life claim and sea pass, which is a service included in Alive and Well. Something to consider is the incorporation of the government within America in 1868 in the state of Delaware as a private company, which then seized control of the District of Columbia when the 41st Congress passed an act to provide a government for the District of Columbia. February 21st, 1871, an act establishing a separate form of government for the District of Columbia, which they had no constitutional authority to do. The U.S. is bankrupt and your straw man secures the debt. With the 70-year Corporate Debt Restructure Emergency Banking Relief Act declared by what the hell is his name? Roosevelt, in 1933, the government was in bankruptcy. So the governors made a pledge to collateralize the citizens of the United States by pledging the energy and assets of the people backing the government and securing the debt. So you are now a transmitting utility. But there was one little problem. Natural living people cannot interface with legal fictions, corporations, so they had to create a bridge or a false, tangible extension of power to mentally manipulate false belief in the government corporation. The so-called government of today is not the government created by the Constitution. It is a corporation operating in commerce for profit. The corporate U.S. is a business dealing with fictions. It is a business, and every transaction is now considered by the United States Incorporated to be a commercial transaction by fictional entities, otherwise known as fictions at law, otherwise known as your straw man. How did this happen? When the governors of yesteryear made their pledge, they agreed to register the birth certificates of the people with the U.S. Department of Commerce, making these certificates the security instruments, collateral, backing the pledge. The legal fiction was created by the fraudulent conveyance of language as a method for a legal fiction. Whenever the government or any corporation instigates a process using an all capital lettered name, they are using it against the legal fiction. However, unless you are a secured party or have taken other steps, you have assumed or otherwise accommodated it. Your name in all capital letters is not your name. It's really just a logo. The living man and the straw man are separate things. A living flesh and blood man cannot be a legal fiction, and a legal fiction cannot be a living flesh and blood man. One is real or natural, the other is created by law and is fiction. Whenever a government agency, such as a court, determines liability, it is a liability directed or laid upon the legal fiction straw man, since everything is done in commerce with fiction and corporate entities. You are presumed, as evidenced by the pledge of your governor, to be the surety for the straw man, and you have to pay the fine, the fee, the tax, the debt, or the other liability, such as child support. Remember, every transaction is presumed by the government to be a transaction in commerce by a legal fiction. If you want evidence of this in action right now, get a strong magnifying glass and inspect the line where you sign your name on your personal checks. It's not a line, it's micro-printed words spelling out authorized signature. You are the living man or woman authorizing the straw man on your check. Your name in all capital letters at the top. One way out of this is to overcome the presumption that you are the surety for the straw man. That's why the secured party process is an advantageous way to defeat this presumption. By using the Uniform Commercial Code via public notice, which is the code that the fictional commercial world operates under. What is the Uniform Commercial Code? The UCC is a general and inclusive group of laws adopted by all states to further uniformity and fair dealing in business and commercial transactions. It is a set of suggested laws relating to commercial transactions and is one of many codes that grew out of late 19th century movement towards uniformity among state laws. We help you capture the straw man by establishing a security agreement, backdated to your 18th birthday, between you and the straw man. And then you file a UCC-1 financing statement to secure a claim via a superior security interest against the all-capitalized legal fiction straw man. the property, and the collateral. This security interest, or what would be considered the registration of title, control, is placed upon the birth certificate, Social Security account, driver's license, etc., by and through acceptance for value. Included in the process is the creation of a power of attorney, copyright notice, hold harmless indemnity agreement, and more. The UCC financing statement, which includes the security agreement, the lien, the copyright notice, a private registered bond, the legal notice and demand I've told you guys about, and others, and the filing of the existence of these documents will redeem you and your debtor strawman from the commercial system and establish documented evidence to overcome the presumption that you are the surety for the strawman. When all has been accepted for value, including the birth certificate, you become the holder in due course of all the documents, collateral, and property, and are now in commercial control of the property, the collateral, and the debtor. The debtor is your all caps. You will issue a private registered bond for investment in the amount of $100 million sent to the United States Treasury, identified by the debtor, strawman's birth certificate and social. This bond is filed on account to be used by the creditor, that's you, for any public liabilities. Successful completion of this process creates you as a secured party or lien holder over that fictional strawman name, therefore protecting its assets from lien, levy, seizure, garnishment, or forfeiture. Fraud voids all contracts if the parties being defrauded takes affirmative action to call out the fraud, which is also accomplished with your UCC-1 filing and notifications. Being a secured party is in effect canceling out the disastrous effects of those contracts in your life that were done without your full knowledge, consent, or your best interest at heart. And that sounds like a great idea.